because in the beginning, when you decide, oh, Christianity's not working for me, or Judaism isn't working for me, or Islam is not working for me, because there's something that is pulling me that is outside of the ethos of these major religions. I was first introduced to Mesopotamia as a child. It was through the lens of the Bible, and I don't know if any of your listeners have heard any of my other interviews, but my go-to response when people ask me, oh, what was your inspiration, or what brought you into paganism or the occult or whatever, the Bible was my gateway drug. I cut my teeth on Old Testament and New Testament scriptures. Inanna is not just the descent. Inanna is also the goddess who #kill your rapist.
Welcome back, everybody. My name's Fratro D. You know me. This is On the Mysteries. Now, I used to call the show, Samuel, I used to call it Voces Mysticae, because if you have a podcast or an interview setup, whatever you want to call it, a show, if it doesn't sound mystical, how can anybody take you seriously, right? If it doesn't sound like edgelord core, then you're who's going to take you seriously? But I think we're just going to start calling a show On the Mysteries. So you're the first where I'm just going to say On the Mysteries. Guys, I am here recording a conversation today with Samuel David, who is a Mesopotamian malcontent, and occasionally, and I'm hoping that today he will mansplain some things to me about the mess we've made of Potamia. And I know that I am guilty. As someone whose main area of focus is in Orphism and Greco-Egyptian areas of expertise. When I talk about something out of Mesopotamia, I'm usually talking through my hind parts by comparison. So it is a love of mine, and it is one that I'm really interested in reading about, exploring, and then also just seeing how that fits in syncretically with a lot of my own personal practice. And so I'm really excited to have you on the show, not only to mansplain some of the things that I've said wrong in the past, but just in general to get some airwaves underneath that Mesopotamian current and lift it up as far as we can. So I'm glad to have you, brother. Thanks for coming on and doing this with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
So today we're gonna try and cover quite a bit of ground. I want to talk about some of your books. I want to talk about some of the work that you're doing outside of that with reviving the mysteries and putting them into practice, and also how we can start to pick up the pieces of the mess that we've made, not only in Potamia, but everywhere else, because there's messes to clean up in all of our little niche communities. So it's one of those things that I'm glad to see other people doing that work, because I certainly am trying in my areas. So, albeit not necessarily to the same effect. I don't have one of those fancy books yet, where I've put my name on the side of it. I just can't seem to finish any of them.
Well, I hear that the best way to get your name out there is to put a bunch of disparate work together and add some AI generated art and maybe glean some material from the work of others that you just so happen to make the acquaintance of, and self-publish. That's how you do it.
That seems to be one of the main modes of operation now.
And also never let your face be seen, and do no written or spoken interviews with anyone.
Well, I already blew it, man. My face is all over YouTube at this point, so
womp womp.
I guess I could get facial reconstructive surgery, and then put on some eyeliner, and then I really might be onto something.
Yeah,
We're already off the rails.
Just go balls to the wall. Pete burns it. Call it a day.
Oh man, what an interesting juncture we are in, though, in this community, as it were. A community made up of, it's like a flotilla in a world that has been flooded, and everybody has a bunch of life rafts, but we're banding together. But you have, like, here's the Mesopotamian crew over here, and here's the Greek crew over here. You have some Celts over here, and we're all just clinging on for dear life.
Because wait, isn't that the plot of Waterworld? That sounds like the plot of Waterworld. Where is our Lord and Savior
Kevin Costner? Well, they call him Enkidu, right? Isn't that?
Oh, absolutely.
There was a flood myth or something. You can tell us all about that. But before we go too far off the rails and have too much fun, you've got a project coming up, an Inanna anthology, and this is not the first one that you've done. But I'd like for you to tell the audience and everybody listening what that project's about, what it means to you, and why you have put it together.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Inanna anthology, it's literally a portmanteau of Inanna's name and the word anthology. It had started, let's see, it's 2025 now, and the impetus behind this started around 2017, 2018, and it went through different hands, it went through different incarnations, and at a certain point, when the project changed hands a third time at this point, with me just driving it, and my collaborator Steph compiling all the material and forwarding it to me, it was pretty evident through the content that was submitted for the prior project that Inanna or her Akkadian Semitic cognate Ishtar, or even Astarte to the Phoenicians, had a chokehold on the project. So we kicked around some names and we settled on Inanna anthology. And, we decided, well, we don't know what the theme of this is going to be. We're just going to release it as an anthology that, in fact, let me look at the contents because I have a copy of it here. Volume 1, an anthology of literature, prayers, poetry, hymns, rituals, and artwork dedicated to the goddess Inanna. And there's a lot of material that's in it. I know several of the contributors personally, and seeing their work in print it's interesting because, many of us who are in this particular subculture, because let's call it for what it is, we're a subculture, occultism, esotericism, polytheism, paganism. We are not part of the super culture, the overculture. We're definitely, countercurrent. And, many of us would never think that our names would be in print. And, with the collaborative efforts that so many people have in this day and age in our subculture, we have these opportunities to circulate and to network with others and get our names out there and create viable works of art, whether that would be, the ceremonial arts or the literary arts or the visual arts. And it's a great juxtaposition for this project because we have it all. We have one contributor, Harper Feist, who many know in the OTO community. She contributed to this work. There's a individual by the name of Lindsay River who has been an activist in the UK for decades, and her work is in here. She she's a professional astrologer, and she studies the transits of Venus in correlation to the transits of Venus and how Venus was conceived as an epiphany, as a deity in the ancient world, and how it all relates to the descent of Ishtar or the descent of Inanna. So it's incredibly rich, it's incredibly complex. And I will say there's, speaking from a personal standpoint, there's a lot of my early work that's in there. And I didn't even realize to what extent it would be featured in the book, because this is years ago now. And this was back before I found a community and I had more or less concrete practice, and it was just little compositions here, little compositions there. So some of this work, I'm sure that anyone who picks up a copy of this is going to see my old work compared to my current work and ask themselves, who is this individual and why is his writing style so different now? And then it's like,
well, I mean,
lot can happen in a few years.
It's true. We grow, we change. And if anything, that just makes you more approachable and it makes you more of a human, right? And
Gosh, I hope so.
We can see that, besides the mansplaining and all of the malcontent, we can see the more human side where, here he was before he learned the powers of explaining it to us. But I love the work. I love the idea behind it. And I think more communities would be better off in that setting, collaborating. Because, that is another part. That we are a subculture and we are very small and we are countercultural, but we are also, it seems, always at each other's throats over one tit for tat of the other. The great wizard wars of the online era. That's what it's going to be remembered as, by the way.
anytime I see wizard wars or witch wars or the flame war, gosh, I've been around since Witchbox and various communities that have come and gone since then. We've got Yahoo groups and LiveJournal and Zanga and MySpace, although MySpace seems to have been pretty much drama-free when it comes to polytheism and neo-paganism and occultists all bashing heads or clashing. But yeah,
those were the Kumbaya days.
Those were the Kumbaya days, and now it's just wild. Now it's like watching Madame Mim and Merlin in The Sword and the Stone.
Which is a classic fight, by the way.
Exactly. But there is a video that is on YouTube that someone has produced using the soundtrack from Star Wars The Phantom Menace, The Duel of the Fates.
Oh.
And every single time I see discourse on Facebook, it's always Facebook. It's always Facebook.
Facebook's the worst offender of it.
I swear. And I see these comments and these eruptions or disruptions or these little hiccups, misconceptions and grievances. And the only thing that comes to mind is that entire dubbed clip with Madame Mim and Merlin and their wizard's duel to the Duel of the Fates. It perfectly encapsulates everything. How serious we take ourselves, yet how silly we appear to everyone else who is just viewing as a witness or as a casual bystander, or as, if you're like me, a looky-loo in the comments, because, sometimes food and drink doesn't sustain us. We need to see some drama.
And we are replete with it. There's so much. I like it. I would say it's like the Madame Mim and the Merlin fight, but let's throw in some WWE just for good measure.
Oh.
Because what I always see is it's not just the two talking heads, right? It's also all of their following. And you get a tit for tat from somebody who's not even involved in the original disagreement.
Oh my God. So there's one individual who, they happened to have a hashtag that was going on for a while. And as I'm watching all of this, and then there's accusations of sock puppet accounts and accusations of people making up these elaborate, exorbitantly overblown identities for themselves. And I start to see this pattern, and I'm like, I love what you guys have done. This is great. You're keeping yourselves relevant. I don't know if this is a kayfabe, to use, wrestling terminology, but at the same time, you are all coming across as crazy. And I slowly started to unfollow, and at one point unfriended, because of the implications of, oh, you're friends with so and so, or
Oh, then
so
you
and
get
so, and
into
there's
that.
pictures. You get into that, and I mean, I obviously, these are individuals who are relatively harmless in the grand scheme of things, because they don't have ideologies that would cause harm to others. So it's it's old hat, but you start realizing that the proximity to some people is like uranium. So you have to distance yourself to a degree, from one degree to another. And then, suddenly you're receiving friend requests from people that you don't know, or messages from people that you don't know. And you're not responding to them in time, or, you're not accepting their friend. And then they just immediately block you, because they think that you're on the dark side of the force, or you're siding with either Madame Mim or Merlin the magician. You can't win. You cannot win for trying, and we can do better, especially when
I agree.
the super culture, if you will, is already driving us off a cliff, regardless of where you are on the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, the infighting doesn't serve anyone, and whether
No.
it's because it exists at all scales, right? It's not
right, and we talk about our higher selves, and we talk about for the greater good, and we talk about doing the great work. But if we're all kicking each other while we're down, or we're stealing each other's milk money, or copying each other's homework, are we really doing the great work, or are we just putting on this elaborate show of egotism and how thin-skinned we really are?
Well, it is all theater after all, so like it's it's all theater. But it is interesting, and we have a lot of, like I said, a lot of maintenance to do. One of the things that I find really interesting is how much the community has grown in just the last 10 to 15 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But there's also, I feel like it kind of has hit a cliff for growth in recent years. You can see people jumping ship and going back to other sides, or the superculture, if you will, which that is historically how this thing has ridden out. We have peaks, and then we're going to have some valleys. But I'm interested to see your perspective on what it is that we can do as individuals, not only in the work that we put out for the community, right? Because there's that aspect of the great work, is what is my contribution to the community? And then there's the internal stuff, what we do in our own individual practices. And hopefully that does reflect in your, external grand opuses, if you will. But what's your perspective on how we can do better as individuals and as a community? Like, if there was a grand vision that you could see for us, what would that look like? I know it's a big question, but
it's one of the questions of the ages. I really think that the most important thing that we could do is to recognize the fact that, despite what our spiritual pursuits are, at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
We are living in a material world that is influenced by spiritual things. And if we give in to this notion that, we're all enemies, or, we're all wrong and only I am right, then we're really no different than the the greater culture that, you know, we're all trying to eschew or to distance ourselves from. And, you know, at the end of the day, everybody poops, and you know, everybody, it all smells just as bad. So, you know, what can we do to brighten things up in the meantime? You know, make the air smell a little better by putting aside our minor differences in the face of greater challenges. And I don't know, it's probably it probably sounds more like a humanist perspective, but
yeah,
I think
it's reasonable and rational, and that's maybe not so rational because we know how humans are, but it is hopeful, and I think that's what really drives us as humans, anyways, is having hope for something brighter in the future. And as one of my buddies says, if your magic or your spiritual practice isn't making you happy, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing it? Like, if it's not doing anything for you, if it's not producing a sense of comfort in an anxiety-ridden world, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You should probably stop. Like, and I don't mean that in like a I'm going to tell you what to do sort of way, but like, this is a difficult road to hoe to begin with, and if you can't find some solace in that, then something has gone askew. In there. And so I agree. I think that at the end of the day, we are human. As Socrates would say, you go to sleep at night and say, I know nothing, and you feel a lot happier. I struggled with that mightily for a lot of my life as an intellectual in general. Everything, mind going a million miles an hour and picking up things as quick as I do. Being right was an addiction, and it's something that we all suffer from. There is security, and there is a certain sense of comfort in being right.
Well, we also, you know, when we're not perceived as being correct, we're essentially we're perceiving ourselves to be in a state of weakness or vulnerability, and you know, who wants to be weak or vulnerable in the eyes of others?
Especially in this subculture, because then you might be under the influence, man. Of the man.
Yeah. Or you're giving someone a reason to brag because you have a string of bad luck, and my curse is working. I
know. We could go on and on and on about that, but I'd rather talk a little bit about.
Let's not touch that third rail.
I mean, hey, you know what? It causes controversy, and people love that for clicks, right? I'm not above clickbait, but I'd like to talk a little bit about your practice, what experiencing the Mesopotamian mysteries is like for someone in the modern era. We talked a little bit off stage before we got on about understanding the context and how much of that is missing for us in the modern day. And even as we try to rebuild many of these practices, we are probably never going to have the full picture. So what does it feel like now to be in a situation like you are, where you are really taking that on your shoulders in a community? Of course, it's not just you. I understand that. But what does that feel like for you guys, for that community? What's it like to experience this today?
You know, it's wild because with the work that I'm doing, you know, I want to be true to the sources, and I also want to ensure that the spark, if you will, that spark of genius or what have you, that, you know, caused early human oh goodness, I can't talk right there. I need to chew my words before I speak them. That caused early humans in the Fertile Crescent, specifically in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, to perceive the numinous around them and give names to them, and, you know, epithets and comprehend them by way of cultural stories and customs and landmarks and, you know, concepts that are completely foreign to us and have no discernible translation. And it's interesting because I feel like I'm in college all over again, because in the beginning, when you decide, oh, Christianity's not working for me, or Judaism isn't working for me, or Islam is not working for me, because there's something that is pulling me that is outside of the ethos of these major religions, or Hinduism if you're of that faith, or Buddhism if you're of that faith. Anyway, my thought process is, we get to a certain point where we realize, oh, there's something out there. And what's out there for me now is not what was out there for me then. Because when I was first introduced to Mesopotamia as a child, it was through the lens of the Bible. And I don't know if any of your listeners have heard any of my other interviews, but my go-to response when people ask me, oh, what was your inspiration, or what brought you into paganism or the occult or whatever, the Bible was my gateway drug. I cut my teeth on Old Testament and New Testament scriptures ever since I was a child. I grew up in the Pentecostal church and had all sorts of wild experiences within that cultural milieu. And when I realized that it wasn't for me and I start searching for other things, I find myself gravitating towards Mesopotamia or Sumer or Babylon or Akkad, Assyria, what have you, because these are the things that revealed themselves to me in my formative years when I was, in the shepherd's fold, if you will.
Love that.
And so I find these little breadcrumbs and these bits and pieces in the accessible material that I could find in the church library. And then I go to a secular college and have my eyes completely wide open, because I now have access to a secular college library. And I start reading things and pieces start coming together. And then gradually over time, because my primary focus in college was the arts, and then it was the arts and humanities. And so as I've grown older and have tried to enrich my faith, I mean, let's call it for what it is. It is a religious expression of the need to contact and communicate with the spirit and with the divine. I found myself gravitating more towards academic texts to inform my practice, and it's complete night and day. We look at the accessibility of books coming out from major pagan publishers and how easy it is, but then we also find that when it comes to things that are outside of the norm of the subculture, there's still a void there, and when that void is there, we have to turn towards the academic world to find the missing pieces. And so I find that as I've gotten older, while I ardently pursue the unseen world, or the numinous, or the spiritual, give it a name and that's what applies, I also find myself in desperate need of having a tight grip on reality. And as one of my friends put it, the further you are from the source, in this case, the further you are from Sumer, Babylon, Akkad, Assyria, Nippur, all of these various Mesopotamian cities, and the cults of those gods and the practices, the easier it is to slip your modern misconceptions. And this is actually something that I have come up against multiple times with regard to a spirituality that is linked to the distant past, where the Western culture and Western societal norms are not coherent, or they're not consistent. throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia, or
Yeah.
from one culture to the next, because the Sumerians were different than the Akkadians, and the Akkadians and the Babylonians and the Assyrians, they all spoke a Semitic language. Sumerian is an isolate language, so there are differences there. But when we look at these modern differences that we have, there's no one for one. Our Western societal views on the family unit or gender and identity and all of the things that make us who we are completely foreign when you look at these same things and how they were perceived by ancient peoples. So my cultural values would not be consistent with, the cultural values of someone from 3000 BCE living in Uruk, worshiping Inanna, or, being bonded to her temple as a temple slave, or,
Right, and that's a challenge for a lot of us too. I think there's we do a fair bit of projection back into those times with our own moral and ethical frameworks today. We try to kind of jimmy them in, right? We're like, oh well, let's make sure that we keep our existing framework of reality, and then where we can pepper in what this old one was. And that's a disservice not only to us but to them, of course, to those who came before us. And so it is, I think, for all of us, that juggle between realities, because these people did operate much differently than we do. And even our academic the academic world, many of whom up to this point have not been practitioners as well, are subject to that too. So when we read those, even if you get into some of the deep, really heady academic texts about any one of these ancient cultures, you understand that, oh, well, that's just your interpretation through the lens of what we are working with as a society now.
Exactly.
And it is a juggling. It's like, where does my experience match up with what the source says and what this expert says on the source, right? Because that's what we're all dealing with all of this. Well, Samuel David says this about it. My experience
he's wrong, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, well, there's that. But I'm curious about your personal experiences with that and how that challenges how academia has portrayed that.
It's.
Have you ever had like a real man, that just doesn't jive?
Yes, and it really depends. I've noticed, because with my YouTube channel, I want to be as accurate as possible based on the current academic consensus. And I'm not presenting it as an academic because I don't have the academic credential. I'm not a PhD. I'm a celebrant of these mysteries, but I still believe that it is of the utmost importance to honor the thing and present evidence and present information to educate people, because we're a society that is, devolving when it comes to the intellectual pursuits of the people that came before us. So that's why I am an insufferable academic, according to some, and a mansplainer, according to others. And I want to be certain that I'm not leading someone, down the primrose path and giving them this idea that, just because, X equals Y in the United States, X equals Y in ancient Sumer. And back to the whole wish fulfillment and unfortunately self-indulgent behavior. It's really a stumbling block, especially when there's so much out there that we can focus on and use to enrich a practice or enrich our worldview. One thing that really struck home with me was a friend of mine who is indigenous, and we have this discussion a lot. It seems to be, you know, this running topic. She's of indigenous descent in the U.S., and there's this no, and I know that, you know, many will roll their eyes, because sometimes I roll my eyes when I say the word myself, but we like to throw around the word colonization,
Yeah.
or colonialism, and yeah, some treat it as a buzzword, some just, you know, find it annoying, but there is this sense of colonization when it comes to how we're interpreting the world. And it's not just with, you know, the ancient world that, you know, was inhabited by people of color, or, you know, what have you. It's also in the ancient European world. We have all of these misconceptions, and we colonize these concepts and make them more relevant to us. And we're completely doing a disservice, because these people had a distinct way of life, and they had distinct identity, and they had a distinct culture, or history of culture. And there's so much disservice that's being done, because we don't want to look at the ugly bits. We don't want to look at the bits that are completely incongruent with our modern way of life, right, and our modern conveniences. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this, and, you know,
that's an interesting concept, colonizing the past.
Yeah,
we're like time travelers colonizing little bits and pieces and stripping away the parts that are distasteful to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's natural human behavior, unfortunately. But it's something that we, as a subculture and a community claiming to be awoken, if you will, conscious and aware of our proclivities,
ascending to the fifth dimension.
Yes, all of those great things we should be very much aware of when we are doing it. Or should be, at least. I don't even like using the word should. It's a dirty word to me. It's one of those things that I can't get behind that word, but I just use it twice. So you can see how good I am at following my own directions. But we do very similar things to what our own contemporary religious practitioners do. We cherry pick,
which is wild, because, for instance, one would expect that there's this notion among many neo-pagans, many occultists, whenever there's evangelical discourse, the same tropes are being trotted out. Oh, well, if you're Christian and you're, you know, using this verse, why are you not following, you know, the Levitical laws, or the Deuteronomical laws, and we collectively expect people like evangelicals to know the width and breadth of the Bible from beginning to end, and to have intellectual conversations, and to also understand the culture, and understand the history, and understand the evolution of, you know, scripture from the Hebrew Old Testament and all the way through to the Gnostic Gospels, and then to the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Trent and all these things. And it's irresponsible. It really is. It's just irresponsible. If we're expecting others to meet these metrics, why are we unable to meet the same metrics ourselves?
Yeah, it comes from our penchant as humans, I think, to want to put everything into neat little boxes, right? Yeah. You know, you were speaking about it as well, like how you can't come up to somebody and say, "Oh, you celebrate the Mesopotamian mysteries." Well, what era? What 1,000-year period are we even considering, and how much it could have changed based on this city or that city state? It's not ancient Greek religion. What? That's where are you at? Samothrace, or are you in Cyprus? Like, Same thing with Egypt. Everybody, well, Egyptian religion. Okay, which gnome are we talking about?
Yeah.
Like, is they all
Which
have a different
temple?
creation myth? Like,
Yeah.
like, so we tend to put everything in boxes for the sake of communication, right? So that we can get across a point. This is where I'm coming to you from. But I think that's where a lot of it stops, and it becomes identity, right?
Yeah.
This is a identity label that I have chosen because I either enjoy the aesthetic or I enjoy conversing about it, right? And I don't. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. If that's your game, just be very clear that that's what you're doing, right? There's plenty of us that are LARPing in the in this subculture, and I don't mean that offensively. It's just this is what we do. In fact,
Yeah.
I think I could say very comfortably myself, getting into it at first, that's very much what it felt like until it developed into something else, and something deeper. And we have to have patience for that, obviously, when conversing with each other. Like, where are you at? Like, if you have somebody who's very new to it, we can't expect them to have the full breadth of knowledge and expertise that you would, right? And so I think overall, all of us could use a little more patience and willingness to help each other. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have from a modern perspective and dealing with these antique ideas is that the sense of community has completely evaporated in our world. Community doesn't exist in what I like to call the cult of the individual, especially in the United States. Within the rest of the world, it's potentially better. I'm not going to speak to what their situation is elsewhere, but I hope it's better than it is here in the States, because it is so dog eat dog, and it's no different in our subculture. It really is.
It's hustle. It's that hustle culture. It's that mindset.
So how many videos and books can I crank out so that I can be up there with so and so, and then. How many times do we see collaborations between the talking heads? Like,
when they're not engaged in a wizard war.
That is our collaboration, it seems. The wizard war. Oh, I'm going to start a wizard war this week with Ike and it's a funny world that we live in. And so thank you for sharing that, what your experience has been, both as an academic and as a celebrant of the mysteries. I really like that term. We could use more of that term in the community instead of all of the very pompous and very pointy hat fun titles that we have. I don't mean to joke about our community so much, but it is so rich with mimetic material.
I think that if you take yourself so seriously that you cannot find humor in the situation, this is not the community. This is not the subculture for you.
I agree. Don't take yourself seriously anyways. You'll have a lot more fun. You'll have a lot more fun. So
you certainly have a lot more stories to tell.
So initiation is a big deal within one of your books, Rod and Ring. And I want to pick your brain on how you see that coming about differently through the Mesopotamian lens than maybe how it is portrayed in some of the other communities. One of the things, there are so many deep resonances in the Mediterranean in general between many of the cultures that in our subculture they all touched on, right? Even if we go talk about the Celts, they were there in the Roman times to some extent, and even deeper into history if we go tracing them back to Indo-European roots. Everybody knew about each other, right? And as we look at these individual cultures, they were aware of each other. They were cross-pollinating. They had different ideas about certain things. But from my own perspective, and I try to always be like a kumbaya guy anyways, I'm like, guys, we're all just talking about the same thing. We just have different like skins in a video game. Like, that's really what this is. Can we all get along a little bit more? But there are specific differences tradition to tradition. And I always try to honor that as much as possible. But what is it that's different from your perspective about initiation within the Mesopotamian mysteries? What made it What made it?
Within the context of my book or the context of history?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's go with the first one.
Okay. So with regard to Rod and Ring, the book itself was just prior to that book being published, it was really just rituals that I was doing for myself to fill that void, because when you go to any occult bookstore and you're looking for books on orders or esoteric studies, what have you, the majority, if not 99% of those books, so we're just going to say the majority, they're focusing on these ancient magical traditions through a Western ceremonial lens, whether that would be lodge magic or the derivative that is now Wicca, that completely derives a lot of its practices from ceremonial lodge magic. And unfortunately, you can't overlay ceremonial lodge magic and all of its categories and all of its correspondences and all of its symbols. You can't overlay that upon the Mesopotamian milieu, the Mesopotamian spiritual world, or the various forms of magic, because it's not a one-to-one. There's so many different concepts, and for instance, we'll take the quarters. We'll take that for our example here. Instead of the correspondences to earth and to fire and to air and water, the 4 compass points were the winds in Mesopotamian magic. And again, that is Mesopotamian magic within a specific time period. And at a certain point, it evolves into other things, like the direction of seas. You have the North Sea and the South Sea and the East Sea and the West Sea, which are bodies of water in the ancient worlds that are still with us today. The Black Sea, for instance, the Mediterranean Sea, the Arabian Sea. And again, there's no one for one there. We also look at the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Let's take that for another example. So that is something that many occultists and many people who are neo-pagans or
right,
as one individual I know, I'm a New Age. What was it? I'm a New Age neo-pagan eclectic witch, and it was like, well, say that 10 times fast. But there's so many people that know all of these things that were once hidden behind the doors of a lodge. And again, that's not something that corresponds to a Mesopotamian tradition. And I thought, there's so many sources out there, but there's no source for me. There's nothing there for me and for people like me who were not interested in reviving a purported goddess worshipping cult in the British Isles. We want something that is older than that, or we want something that
just feels like home, right?
That feels like home. We want a spiritual home, and we want as many guidebooks to lead us to that spiritual home. So I look at the Mesopotamian world as a world comprised of timelines and cultures that were all contemporaneous. We have the Sumerians that were living alongside the Akkadians at a certain point until their population was completely assimilated. And, again, we have, let me just put this out there now as I'm rambling. There are no living descendants of the Sumerian people. I don't know who needs to hear this, but the Sumerians do not have any living descendants today. No genetic living descendants. The closest living descendants would be the quote-unquote marsh Arabs. And we'll leave it at that.
But what about not on this planet?
Well,
I'm just
let's talk about where they all are. They're all on Jupiter because that is Nibiru. That is the crossing. But yeah, we have all of these people that are inhabiting this region of the world, and power is changing hands. The kingship is going from one city to the other. The tools of civilization are going from Eridu to Uruk, and the seat of power is going from Sapar to Nippur to Ur, and then to Babylon. It's a constant
and it
changing
changes.
hands. Exactly.
Changes so much to the point where it can at times be jarring.
So jarring, in fact, that one god in one city is on par with another god in another city. You know, we have Enlil, for example, and Marduk, and then we have Ashur. So all of these gods, in the minds of their adherents or their worshippers, their celebrants, they're all vying for these same positions. How do we reconcile that within our modern day spiritual practice? You know, we're going to have to make allowances. We're going to have to bargain here and there. We're going to have to come to a general consensus. And really, that is what my book is all about. You know, you can look at a lot of the material and go, oh, this is kind of, you know, derivative. This is, you know, what have you. I will admit, it is a pastiche of the concepts of the ancient people of Sumer and Babylon and Akkad and Assyria, and the gods that were worshipped by these people that are just as relevant today as they were, you know, millennia ago. And I feel that the work that I've done is sufficient enough to help one build a temple practice, whether that is, you know, a temple that consists of themselves, or in the case of some of my peers who have working covens that have actually used the book to initiate their own members into their covens. So it's pretty fascinating, if I say so myself. But yeah, I wanted something that would speak to people like me who wanted something else to fit the bill. And it's so wild because, you know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I had no intention of having this work published, and you know, it took a lot of poking and prodding for me to finally submit it, and it went from, you know, one hand to the next, and found a home through Anathema Publishing, and you know,
I remember when it came out, and it was one of those moments for me when I saw it, because it's like you say, you go into the local occult bookstore, and we're lucky here where I am in Colorado to have quite a few. We are not like other places in the States that you have like one and it's like got a couple of books. But even so, even with our blessings here, the amount of literature on that Mesopotamian current is so sparse. And so when yours came out, I was like, oh, look at this beautiful thing. We can finally start, you know, like piecing it together. And I love that it started as just your way of figuring out how it worked for you. That's how it, so often we are, and I've talked about this before with others, we're searching for that point of origin, that point of purity, and that doesn't exist. It didn't exist for them either, I don't think, back then. But that obsession with finding that pure point, that authentic point, and then saying, I've really made it, I've really been initiated, is missing the point. The initiation is, for me, and it always has been, since I kind of grokked what that meant, was an invitation. It's an invitation for that side of the spirit to come into your life, and for you to devote yourself to a lifelong, walk with it. Yeah. However,
that is an interesting way to put it.
Well, I mean, we get so caught up in like, I'm in, right? I'm on the inside. I'm on the in group. I'm initiated, you know, and I think it is missing the point. There is a dramatic unfoldment and changing in your life and the way that you view the world in initiation.
Right.
So don't get me wrong there, but that is just the beginning, baby. Like that is the beginning.
Yeah.
What comes after is so much more, and we get caught up in initiation chasing, for crying out loud. That's like from our community to even like our the cousin we don't talk about, people chasing psychedelic experiences. I've had 30 ayahuasca retreats and I'm no different. But it's similar.
Damn, and I haven't even had one. Thanks for, you're really selling it for me.
I haven't either. I don't, that one I've never been called to. But I do like that it was your way of figuring it out, because I think there are plenty of books, there are plenty of magical groups and magical orders that can show you the ropes. But in the end, you have to walk this yourself, and you have to build it for yourself. And I found that's how most of my non-published works are. It's like me muddling my way through, how do I invite this into my life? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've only really just started to publish one on Substack, which is my Aphrodite theurgical works and how I related to that. And it is a daunting thing, right? It's not something I ever intended to publish. It's not something like that, but it was a very personal way of putting the pieces together with the experiences that I was having. These are the experiences that I'm having. This is how I made sense of it. And this is how you could potentially replicate it. And I could see that in your work as well, that very personal touch, which is nice to see. Because if that part's not there, it gets too dry, and then it's like it's not a lived experience. And so we have that really interesting thing going on in our community now, the advent of the scholar practitioner. It's not like it's a new thing in our subculture throughout history, but that there used to be such a divide between academic and scholar, and now it seems we have many hybrid individuals. And
I think that's incredibly fascinating, especially given the width and breadth and scope. But I mean, take Dr. Stephen Skinner for example. I mean, he's got a wealth of material out there, and he has the academic rigor, and that is something that is of the utmost importance if we want to stay grounded in reality and have these many threads to pull from. And that's one of the hopes that I have, one of the pursuits now, not just in writing and having books out there, but also making inroads with academics and with people who have PhDs or MAs or or digging in burial sites or
or the linguists, for crying out loud.
Or the linguists, yeah. I'm really
the people translating it for us.
Yes, I'm really fortunate in that regard. The co-host for my YouTube channel, Jake Baxter, he's got the linguist side down, and I'm absolutely in awe of that, because my emphasis is on the lore and the liturgy. What is it that makes one's heart sing, or what are these stories? That's my passion, and his is linguistics, and it's a beautiful marriage.
It is much better than Dee and Kelly. Hey,
first of all, no one's trying to sleep with the other spouse, so
we don't know if that was totally true. No, I think me and Frater RC talked about that recently about D. But so it's speaking of the song, the heart of things. Your book, The Lioness. Mm-hmm. The Songs of Inanna is a beautiful piece. Thank you for putting that out there for us, because for me, she relates so much to the Aphrodite Venusian current in general, and I try my best not to slap them all into the same box. They're distinct, but they share so many beautiful currents, and I see them as so, if not in the same family, just the same overarching just feeling. And so in reading that, when I did find it, it was warming to the heart. And you speak about that in general, about how, well, it's about beauty and it's about love and it's everything that comes with her. To me, there's so much hope in that current of energeia, if you want to be Greek with it, that the way you present her as well within those pages is really really remarkable. So can you walk us through what that was like for you? What was that book like for you? Not only the creation, but was it was obviously a devotional act, but
yeah, it was actually a transcribed ritual that was recorded by myself and one of my peers who lives in Portugal, Mariana Vital. She recorded the dialogue because it's a call and response ritual. The book itself is a call and response. And I was the voice of the supplicant in this recorded ritual, and she was the voice of Inanna or Ishtar, or in your case, Aphrodite. And it was just, I just pitched the idea to her because this was, if I remember correctly, around the time that COVID still had everyone under its iron thumb, and it was a ritual for Ishtar Fest, which happens every year, brought to you by Hands of Change, and and that was our submission, and then apparently it resonated with a few people, and next thing I know, that rapscallion Jack Grail is taking me by the ear and telling me, "Hey, look, I like this. I like this work. We're going to look at this, and I want you to look at the specs." And so from there, that simple ritual then turned into a book with these incredible illustrations, these cuneiform illustrations by Rowan Cassidy. And it's so wild because Jack had already, done collaborations with Rowan for his Hekateon, and I was like over the moon when he mentioned Rowan Cassidy and the calligraphy, and I just thought, what an incredible marriage of the two, the calligraphic arts and cuneiform, and seeing the initial specs. Not only was I seeing them as, cuneiform, but, and this may sound, morbid to some of your listeners, but it, as soon
they'll
as
be
I saw,
okay.
As soon as I saw the red, like this rough slashing, the first thing that came to mind was, wow, these are like her name carved out of the self-flagellation of her devotees, because historically there were a class of priests, and even during lamentation rituals, who would score themselves with knives and with daggers and other bladed instruments, and that was part of her cultic temple retinue. And so seeing all of this, like this incredible juxtaposition, and this, yeah, it was wild. It was a wild experience.
I think it may sound morbid, but that's us putting our modern perspective on things. The experience of those sorts of things can be seen as beautiful when you try to step back from that. The level of devotion it must take for someone to engage in that, and it's not uncommon historically through various cultures around the globe. Ritual mutilation, things like that, they bring upon ecstasy. They bring upon an ecstatic vision or an experience of the divine. And so if you do find, a little self-flagellation or any other activity that may not fit your Puritan worldview, you might want to assess that people in other parts of time may have thought differently about things than you do.
People today think differently.
Exactly. I thought the blood was it was beautiful. Not only, but part and parcel of what you said, but there's so much of her warfare aspect,
Mhm.
of her feminine aspect too. You know, the shedding of blood as a woman.
Yeah.
These things were all very relevant in seeing that red on the page. I was like,
Well,
this is
let's
potent.
let's just say the female of the species is more deadlier than the male. So
That is, that is one of the things that I love to drive home as much as possible. It's like you guys don't understand that Venus is not to be messed with.
no.
Venus is not to be messed with. I mean, even Enki understands this. Like, read the hymns. He willingly gives up a lot of
Wait,
this
what?
stuff. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what some of your favorite elements of the lore are. I know that's a big bucket to
That is
open
a
up.
big
Like,
bucket. We've got way too much time. And
we may
not a
just
lot
do. We may have to
scrape
record
that.
another episode. It seems to happen to me. Everybody goes, we didn't cover everything we need to. Let's do another one. So we're always open to that here.
So one of my favorite tropes within the corpus of Mesopotamian mythology, whether that and even liturgy, because a lot of hymns have elements or structures that are very similar to mythology. In fact, myth and cult diverged numerous times over, but there are always these underlying currents with mythology and with hymns. And for a while, I was really gung-ho about Inanna's descent. And, I led countless descent rituals, many to great success and a few to some pretty emotionally and emotionally driven and emotionally charged ends. And then I realized, maybe this is territory that, I'm cool with going into, but other people definitely are not, because they've got a lot that they need to work through before they can.
Yeah, that has to be challenging. That has to be. I know in my own practice with catabasis in general, it is extremely difficult, and what you face is tremendous. And so leading people through that has got to be a challenge, especially if there's unresolved stuff that's going to come up. You have to have, I'm sure you have to have somebody on site who is helpful in those situations, like even psychotherapists.
Yeah, in this last instance, this was the last time I ever did it. It was at Paganicon in 2019, I think. And I led a descent ritual, and at the very end of the descent ritual, I had an effigy of Inanna, almost like a death mask, as a focal point. And there was an altar that was set up with, a little shrine space and some offerings. And I encouraged people at the end of the ritual, if they want to, address the goddess or, just pay some sort of homage or respect or what have you. There's that space for it. There were a lot of people that were deeply and viscerally affected. There was one woman who I just remember, like, at the close of the ritual, the lights are still off. There's still electric tea lights flickering, and you can see the shadows on the wall. But this woman crawled out of the room on her hands and knees, like visibly shaken. And I realized in that moment, I am not a mental health professional.
Yeah.
And she is going through something that a mental health professional or medical professional is equipped to handle. And this is not something that I need to keep doing. This is something that needs to stop, because I personally, ethically, I cannot be responsible. I mean, I'm not a mental health professional, but I have worked in that field in some capacity, and have done like crisis calls and intervention with at-risk teens. And Yeah. When you see someone in a state of shock like that, and you don't have the tools at hand,
Yeah, I get. Yeah.
it's like just talking about it right now gets me really upset because I just, in hindsight, I feel so foolish that I even facilitated something like that. So now my focus, no longer doing the descent, although the next Inanna anthology is going to be about the descent. But
You can't shake it, can you?
I can't shake it, can I? But my focus for that, and this is something that I'm really emphasizing while promoting it and taking submissions. I want this next anthology to be more, I don't want to say academic in nature, but something that's more grounded in the reality in which we live. So if anyone is interested in submitting and the descent of the goddess is something that calls to you, please, by all means, I'd love to see your submission. But also keep in mind that I want submissions that are well thought out, that are, well written, well researched, because there's so much that goes into the descent itself. There's so many cultural context clues and cultic practices that really inform this. It's not just a Jungian archetype, a set of archetypes, or Campbell's The Hero's Journey. But yeah, there's that. Enough about the descent. One of my favorite myths, actually, concerning Inanna herself, is the myth of Inanna and the gardener known as Shukalateta, who Inanna, doing her thing as as a great and powerful goddess, as all gods, she needs to sleep, and so after her many feats and journeys and acts of heroism and harrowing, death-defying power, she decides that she's going to take a nap in a garden under a tree. And while she's napping, while she's in a deep sleep, apparently it's these states of slumber are like a drunken stupor, because that is how the gods sleep. They sleep so deeply, it's like a drunken stupor. So while she's asleep, she is sexually assaulted by a gardener. And when she wakes up, she realizes, what has happened to her, that she, the goddess of love and warfare and desire, and, somebody has taken her autonomy from her. So she searches for this gardener, and as she's searching for him, like every place that he hides, she finds him, and she's just going from one place to the next, and leaving destruction in her wake, and rivers turning into blood, and finally she finds him, and she destroys the city, and she kills him. But she says that she gives him the fate that his name will always be remembered, before she essentially goes Hellraiser on him. And my takeaway from that is, I wish that people, and this, definitely to your listeners who are listening right now, Inanna is not just the descent. Inanna is also the goddess who #kill your rapist. Let me just put that out there. So, the descent is an empowering myth, but so is this myth, where Inanna enacts justice, because justice is denied to her, because the perpetrator is being hidden and protected at all costs. And eventually she catches up with him, and it's not pretty.
There's a lot
of justice.
There's a lot to be said there about the society, how they saw things, how justice is portrayed. Definitely. That's with any myth that you're considering. Mm-hmm. It is, of course, written by the people and tells you very much what they're interested in passing on. What does justice mean to that particular group of people? and for Inanna, who was so popular to that culture, and to many of them, and just continued to persist, it seems.
Yeah.
That is a powerful and potent story. Like I said before, don't mess with Venus. It's not good for you. It just isn't. It didn't work out for anybody. It didn't work out for Zeus. It didn't work out for Pick. It didn't work out for Dumuzid.
I'm telling you, the female of the species is more deadlier than the male.
You know, in Egypt, it was Sekhmet or also Tefnut. If humans were being unruly, if justice and cosmic order was not being upheld, the Eye of Ra looked down, and that was that lioness. And so there, you see, there's a lot of resonance there, even in Egypt. The whole myth of Ra having to fake turn the rivers of blood as beer to get her drunk. So, and there's another resonant motif. You have to get this goddess drunk in order for her to fall asleep and stop the carnage, or else there won't be any humanity left.
Someone needs to sing this savage beast to sleep.
Exactly. Do not mess with the lioness. It's not going to be good for you. That is a good one. So we've talked a lot about Inanna, but there's obviously more to the Mesopotamian mysteries. I don't know how much you focus on that outside of it. I know you have the book, The Red Shepherd, which is speaking about her consort, but outside of the so Inanna-centric material, what else really sparks your interest, or are you planning on exploring anything new in the future? Because there's so many to choose from, right?
Yeah,
like I went on a tangent recently in one of the videos that I did talking about Damkina and the sacred bonds myth. And I went down a rabbit hole looking for information on that, and that's just one of so many. So is there something else on the horizon for you, or stuff that you really just like to dig or sink your teeth into?
Right now, just as a hobby to keep myself sane in this insane world, I'm doing a deep dive into the Enuma Elish and doing essentially a comparative analysis of all of the translations that are available to us in English, because of the way it's translated in one period, from one decade or even one century to the next. I mean, here we are, it's 2025, and Assyriology is relatively new in the grand scheme of things. It's still relatively new, and a lot of the old assertions and the old conclusions we're finding are old for a reason. They're completely outdated, and they're framing the study of this period in this region in a different light. So there's that. I'm also going to eventually be working on a collaboration with my friend Shea Belay, who released his book Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path. We've noticed, I mean, ever since we became friends several years ago, a lot of our conversations have revolved around this intersection between Mesopotamian cosmology and demonology and esotericism, and the quote-unquote left-hand path. And what's interesting is there's a great deal of imagery that's used. There's a great deal of esoteric terminology that's used, or deities that are presented or conceived in various ways. And I think that both sides of the coin, or they could be more enriched if the culture was given or cultures plural was given, or were given, the attention that's due to them. And I'm not a practitioner by any means of left-hand path, spirituality because the gods gave us two hands to clap, right and left. So I'm very much a middle road kind of guy.
Yeah.
But there's just something about the presentation of Mesopotamian cosmological motifs in the left-hand path that really just I have such an abiding love for. It's really weird. It's almost like the abiding love that I still have for Christianity, though I'm no longer a Christian. It's like, you know, these things of our childhood that, you know, at the time we chafed under, but in the as adults we kind of look back and we're like, you know what? It was good for a while. It was good while it lasted. I mean, there were some
That's a
horrific
mark.
things, but
That's a mark of healing with that experience. I
yes, I agree.
often tell people that there's so much that when you walk into this world, there are a couple of main components. One of which is where did you come from? Where's your ancestors? Who are where are they from? Get to
Right.
know them. Get to know them in some way, shape, or form. Understand what is calling to you from a blood and bone sort of level.
Mhm.
And that's one piece of it. But we are all domesticated and raised under, I won't say a colonizing religion, but most of the Western world is under the yoke of Christianity, and we, if we come into this aspect of the subculture, there's some grind or some axe we all have to grind with it.
Yeah.
And there is a calling to heal that, whether
Right.
or not that severs that bond at a time. Sometimes that healing will set you free from that, and sometimes it will deepen it. Right.
Absolutely.
In my own experience, it was becoming baptized at the age of 23 that gave me the dissolution to move on. It was a beautiful, amazing, deepening ritual, but it was like an invitation to go find God elsewhere.
You know,
Uh,
it's funny. You were baptized at 23. I was baptized at 19. It was something that, you know, my mom especially, she's whew, very very, she is in for a penny, in for a pound. Ardent, faithful Christian. Like, it's in her DNA. Like, one time we were having a conversation and I mentioned something about atheism, and the concept of atheism was completely foreign to her. Um, like, she could not comprehend anything that I was saying when I was like, "Well, Mom, there are people in the world that don't believe in God, you know, and they don't believe in spiritual things." And she's like,
what?
"What?" And if I
Those
slip into an accent, it's because that's how my mom is a Pakistani woman, and she, despite having lived in the States, you know, since the 80s, she still has a very pronounced accent. And so, you know, when I talk about her, I can't help but mimic her accent, and it's all love. It has nothing to do about, you know, characterizing, you know, making a characterization of my mother. It's just something. Whenever my brother and
it
I are
just
together,
happens.
it just happens.
That's how somebody
It's
speaks. That's
it's
how you
just
know
how
them,
somebody
right?
speaks, exactly.
So
But you know,
did she encourage you to undergo that?
she put, like, for years, she was like, you know, you're going to be 16, or you're 13 now, you can be baptized, or you're 14, you can be blah 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 blah. And you know, it was around the age of 19, um, while I was in college and I was, you know, starting to have a secular education and becoming introduced to a secular world.
They
Um,
ruined you, didn't they?
they ruined me. What's interesting though is it was around this time that I was also coming to terms with my esoteric pursuits and realizing that, you know, the things that I read about in the Bible or that are preached to me from the pulpit, they don't correspond to the greater consensus of reality, past,
Hmm.
present, and future. And so, you know, I got baptized at the age of 19, and it was around that time that I also started drifting away from the church.
How funny.
Um, and you know, I said it before and I'll say it again. I was dancing the tango between Christianity and polytheism for decades since I was a child, because that's, you know, I was so focused on understanding why these enemies of God's chosen people had such power and prestige and worshiped different gods. And so I got baptized at 19, and then went on to live my sinful hedonistic life. But while I was writing The Red Shepherd and pulling all my research together for that, I realized as I was writing it, as I was doing the research, as I was, reading old material, it was like, I feel the Lord in the room with me right now.
There is a lot there. There is so much
definitely
there. I was going to ask you if that did give you a sense of return to your domesticated religious upbringing, because it's so intrinsic in the motif of the Old Testament and the New Testament. The shepherd is so big. And I wondered if that was like not only homey for you, like, oh, this is a little taste of home, but also like a culmination, like going and understanding it from multiple sides.
It definitely was a culmination. In fact, around the time that I was compiling all the material, and because a lot of the material is also stuff that was just didn't have a home in Rod and Ring, because, it's just the way it was written and presented. And one of my friends that I had known since 2007, 2008, something like that. He went from like hardcore super evangelical to very liberal Catholic. So we were chatting. Somehow we started chatting about it, and I shared my research with him, and that was one of his questions. He goes, do you think that this is like Christ's way of, kind of tying up loose ends with you? And, I didn't think about it until then. And I was like, it's interesting. That's definitely a perspective that I really didn't understand. And now I think I do. And what's funny is, like, since then, my mom gave me a little figurine of Christ as the Good Shepherd with some sheep. One of the sheep is a ram, and it looks suspiciously. It has a very Luciferian vibe to it. And then another friend gave me a little icon of Christ with the wounded heart, and just to my right over here, I've got an effigy of a shepherd holding a lamb with a candle like recessed in front of it. And it's like all of these little things coming together. This little ram here that's behind me, I found that at an occult shop on a day that I needed an effigy of Dumuzid for a ritual that, and I didn't have any effigy pieces with me, and it was just like all these little things coming together. And so, I think that the Red Shepherd was kind of my tying up that loose end and reconciling the identity that I had prior to all of this.
That's beautiful. That is really beautiful. And I wish that more of us could get there, because I think it's so vital to releasing any of that feeling of angst and or trauma related to it. And everybody has their own, experiences with that. But when you find that resolution, there really aren't words for it. Veils being lifted, all that can occur, and it shows you how much bigger than these categories what we're dealing with is.
Yeah, without a doubt.
In fact, it's beautiful.
Hugo Radow, who was an early Near Eastern scholar, I quoted him in the book because he said that the Sumerians were grasping in the dark for Christ, and they found that figure in Dumuzid. And I think about that often, because we're all to some degree grasping in the dark for something. And we're going to find whatever we find is going to be that light source to us in those moments. And sometimes we stay with that light source by the name that we've always known it to be. And sometimes we turn that light source off and we find another light source. And, I think that we get to, this is a tangent that I often go on, the reality of the gods differs from one person to the next. But if we look at the nature of the gods are eternal, according to ancient thought, and for those of us who subscribe to that same reality. If the gods are eternal and the gods can take multiple forms, as evidenced throughout millennia of mythology and cultic worship and practice, then why can't that same god, in this instance, let's use Venus, why can't a goddess take on an astral epiphany that is the planet Venus, or the morning and evening star? Or why can't she appear to me in the form of a dream? Or why can't she appear to you in the form of an archetype, or to someone else as an ancestor? Like, the gods speak to us in the language
however we're willing to receive them.
Exactly. In the language that they speak is the language that we will understand, the symbolism that they will use. And I think that we get so caught up with, and that was something that I was really challenged with, because that's something that I brought with me from my Christian identity and my Christian upbringing, that God is God, and there's no other iteration. But at the
that's
end of
a hard one to let go of.
It really is. It really is.
It really sticks with you, and it's I liken it to spirit phobia that was spread by the last couple hundred years of Christian thinking in the Protestant vein. Be very wary of all these spirits because they're all out to get you and to lie to you and all this. That disenchantment of the world is responsible for it can't come in another form. That divine light can't come in another form. It has to come in the pre-approved packaging that our capitalist consumer society has told you that it will come in. And if it's not, it's tricking you, and it will drag you off to the eternal hellscape. And that sort of spirit phobia is not only transcendentally incorrect, in my opinion, it is abusive and very traumatizing to people, especially when you're talking about teaching that to children.
Yeah.
That part still grinds my gears, even though I don't have an axe to grind with the church anymore. And I really didn't at the end of it. It was a beautiful, life-changing, amazing experience in baptism that allowed me the opportunity to find that image everywhere. And put into practice a lifelong pursuit of doing so. And it has been nothing but challenging, but also rewarding. Just like having children, it turns out. That's what they tell you anyway. And I'll
take your word for it, because I don't have kids. I don't have time for kids. I have 3 cats. That's too many.
You know what? I have 4. I have 4 cats.
Kids? Oh,
4 cats.
4 cats.
4 cats. 2 kids. So, thanks for sharing that bit, because I was going to get to that with the Red Shepherd, because it does seem like a homecoming trip with everything that is packed into that icon.
Well, that's why I really insisted on the words of Dumuzid being in red, because I was like, you know what? We're going to send this off in style.
Chef's kiss. Drop
Why
the
are
mic.
these words
I'm
in
done.
red? Well, if you turn to page XYZ.
Because that's what the Lord of the host says. Oh, man. What else do you want to cover? What else is on your mind or coming up that the audience should know about? We've been on for about an hour and 36. We've
We
covered
could
some
stretch
really
this out
interesting
into
spaces.
a trilogy. We'll give
We
it
really could.
the Peter Jackson treatment. I'm kind of I don't want to say scaling back completely, but I'm kind of putting some of my writing pursuits on hold. I mean, there for a while, Rod and Ring came out.
Yeah, you were back to back.
Yeah, Lioness came out immediately on the heels of Rod and Ring, and then Red Shepherd. So I feel like that's enough for now. I did have a short story that was published by Bibliotheca Alexandrina, which is they're a Hellenic group, but the specs that they gave for submissions, my submission met the bill, and that is a short story or novella actually about the human sage Adapa, who was Enki or Yah's chief priest, and he has his own titular myth, Adapa and the South Wind, and I presented as speculative fiction in the sense that while in myth he was denied immortality because Enki or Yah tricked him, in the novella he finds a way to achieve immortality on his own, and so he's hiding, trying his best to avoid Enki at all cost, and hiding is taking on these various personas throughout the millennia, and now he is an archaeologist specializing in ancient Near Eastern antiquities, and was
hiding in the last place that you would
hiding
look
in
to
the last
find him.
place you would look to find him. Yeah, so that's published in an anthology called Circe or Kirky's Cauldron. And I'm doing the comparative analysis of the Enuma Elish, but
I can't wait for that.
That's going to be fun. That's actually going to be part of my book that I intend to release at some point if the world doesn't end, about Marduk and the Chaos Kampf and the evolution of his cult in Babylon. And really I want it's going to be in the vein of Rod and Ring and Red Shepherd and Lioness, where there is a interactive esoteric current to it, but I really want to impress the reader and test my own academic and research skills, because as much as I love writing about the occult or esoteric science, what have you, every so often you just gotta do your homework and write an essay or a thesis paper and get that out of your system. So this book will be the culmination of that. And again, I'm also working on my YouTube channel, Ancient Near East Meets Modern West, with my linguistic co-host Jake Baxter, and so far that's it.
Yeah, we will. I will definitely put the link to your channel and, of course, to all your works within the video, and see if we can send some of our people your way. Because when it comes to the Mesopotamian world, I mean, who could be better than the malcontent himself when it comes to explaining these things to the people who have interest in them? One of the things on the channel is Inanna was a big one for my channel when I made a video about her, and Dumuzid, he didn't get quite the same love. There's something behind that. It turns out anytime I make a divine feminine video, that gets a lot more love, or hate in some cases, than the male counterparts. So hopefully anybody who is interested in those videos on our channel will gravitate over to your erudition and everything you guys are working on over there, because it is fabulous as usual. And if you are interested in this, of course, guys, check out Samuel's books, because they are not only gorgeously bound and beautiful and worth every penny. I keep having to tell people that you do have to pay for the books. I know that our subculture is really big on piracy, and we love finding PDFs of everything. But if you find value in what the author has been feeding you, when you find that PDF, please go and order the damn thing so that they can continue to provide us with that. Plus, I will say, and this might tick some people off, if your magic and your devotion isn't affording you the money to go buy these books, you should address that. So, if your magic is keeping you poor, there's an issue.
In the words of Christ, magician, free thyself.
Yes. I always, for me at least, spending a pretty penny on a book for my collection, it is more often than not a devotional act. That money is an offering of itself, in and of itself, to the spirit, particularly if you're talking about something above the $50 mark,
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Not everybody has that capability, but when that is your devotion, when that is what you care about most, you find a way to make that happen. And so I do encourage people to take a look at Samuel's books, because they are very much worth it.
And for those who are interested in Rod and Ring, who knows? It might be reprinted within the next year or two.
Ooh,
you never know.
For the discerning and frugal occultist.
Yeah.
Well, brother, we are. I think we're wrapping up here. It feels like we're wrapping up, but I do want to invite you to come back, because I think we only scratched the surface. And I think the more of the cross-pollination that we do on these audiences, particularly on YouTube, is helpful for the whole superculture, which is, I will say, and to my audience who is still clicking and still listening, thank you, because there has been a dramatically sharp dip for almost all of us in the last 2 to 3 months when it comes to views and clicks and all of that. There's some chicanery afoot, if you will, but we will persist, because that is what we do. But I think, I'd love to have you back on and talk about even deeper stuff, like the now correct me on this one, the Zane hymns, Zane. Is it Zane? Is it Zani? How do you pronounce that?
Z-A-M as in Mike, I, it's Zami. It's basically, it's praise hymns. So
it's a M. Yeah. Those, I just recently stumbled across those when going down rabbit holes for the damn Kina elements of one of the videos that I was putting together, and I was like, oh, this is a treasure trove.
Yeah.
This is a treasure trove.
One thing that I found, you mentioned spending money on occult books, but the real money is spent on academic books, because when you compare the two, it's like $300 for a university print of obscure academic, research, and like that's my bread and butter right there. But it's also, if I had my way, I'd be in the poorhouse by all these purchases. And then you've got these mega deluxe edition occult books bound in calf skin with snake skin elements and all these inserts and stuff. And
well, I mean, those are like tokens of your powers, right? If you
I don't know. I don't know. At this point, I'd rather spend my money on an academic book that I'm going to refer to time and time and time and time again.
Yeah.
Even though I do love books, I think that these books by occult publishers are just absolutely stunning.
there was a great run on them too. Like there really was a little flash where that was to gloss them in the way that they did with such fine production is wonderful. But there's so many other ways to dig into it, like you said, with both the academics and boy, that's a rabbit hole. When you get to that level, not that it's levels, but it just feels like it is. You're like, oh man, I've scraped the bottom of the barrel with this layer of the occult publishing world, and you move on to the next one, and you're like, I've scraped the bottom of that barrel, and it always ends in the academic texts, and you're looking at a price tag for this niche, completely niche element that you're looking for.
Book, that is all about Pazuzu, and it's only available in English. Or it's only available in German, because the Germans get the lion's share when it comes to the study of ancient cultures and Assyriology. And it's like, I have a copy of it, an ethically sourced, paid for PDF version. The challenge,
ethically sourced PDFs, free range,
is paid for. It was an academically paid for PDF, because a lot of these academic publishers do release PDFs. You pay the same amount for a PDF as you do an actual bound book, which I think is insane. But this entire book is in German. I took 4 years of French in high school, so I'm ill-equipped to translate this thing. But yeah, if there is ever a German edition that's translated into English, my world is going to be turned upside down, because this book is rich in research and history, and what I have been able to translate into English using Google Translate, it's like it barely cuts beneath the surface.
There's going to be so much that comes to light in the next decade or so, particularly if artificial intelligence can get to the point of translating effectively. What can be opened from all of the stacks of things that are not translated into English, particularly for us English speakers. And in the meantime, again, if you're interested in many of these things, pick up the language. Try to read it in its original context. Some of them are going to be easier, but just
will
in
make
French,
even less sense.
Yes, but just in French and German, there's a mountain of texts in esoterics that you can tackle that nobody else has yet. At least not since somebody did it in the 1700s in France. Right. So I think there is a bright future ahead. There may be some valleys and some darkness in the future, but there's always some brightness for us, and we soldier through it. We persist.